Christian parenting.
Today, we're going to be talking about the power and the how-to of creating routines for faith formation in our families.
One of the awesome things about blessings is you can start speaking blessings over your kid from day one, right? You can hold them close, and whether you're feeding them or you're changing their diaper, you can speak God's truth over them. And that is a way to start the rhythm of discipleship from the very beginning.
Hey, my name is Jay Holland, and this is Let's Parent on Purpose. It's a podcast to help you thrive and not just survive your parenting years. Each week, I'll bring you an insight or an interview that will help strengthen your marriage, your family, or your personal walk with Jesus. And if you find it helpful, I encourage you to subscribe, share it with your friends, and you're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find all kinds of past articles, issues, and resources to help your family. I really believe that any time of year is a great time of year to put some focus on instilling new habits that can help transform you or your kids over a long period of time. But I'm aware that it seems like the beginning of the year, sometimes maybe the beginning of the summer, and then also the beginning of the school year seem to be those times, at least in my life and in a lot of families with kids. Those are kind of the major seasonal change times. So those tend to be times where we look to adding things, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, although, like I said, any time will do. But I like to kind of start out each year with a refocus on some just suggestions and insights and encouragements for little ways that you might be able to, just add something that over the long term can be really powerful in transformation in your family. So last week we had the conversation with Drew Dick on your future self and helping set up your future self for great success. Now, this one really, you could almost say your future family will thank you, or your future kids will thank you. But we're going to be talking about spiritual formation and faith formation using just simple routines, daily routines with your kids. And I'm joined today by Ken Kuhn, who I had not met until connecting with this podcast, and we really click. You're going to really enjoy this conversation. And just some very helpful stuff in there. Ken is a Christian education specialist. He's a former family ministry pastor. He's a coach who focuses on helping young families share Jesus with their kids from a very young age. And he's written a book that I really like called May They Be Blessed. And it's essentially a set of, I think, 52 blessings that you can pray over your children, as well as some devotions that go with the book of Psalms, where they pull these blessings out of. We have a conversation on just some of the different times of days and simple practical ways how you can incorporate blessings and some real good questions that can provoke not just deeper conversation with your kids, but also helping point them to Jesus and strengthening them over the long run to rely on the Lord, to be centered in the Lord, and to be grounded in them. And so this is going to be a helpful conversation if you have an infant or newborn, all the way up through any child still in your house. You're going to benefit from today. So if you want to find out more about Ken, you can do so at his website and his which is theconstantsource.com, as well as I'll put in show notes. He tells some other ways and finding out a bit about his book. I'll put that in the show notes for you. So enjoy my conversation with Ken, and I just encourage you to try to put this stuff into practice. It really, really can transform your children and your families if you can get consistent with it. Ken Kuhn, thank you so much for joining me today on Let's Parent on Purpose. It's a privilege to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
So I love starting off my year of podcast into just helping kind of invest and dive into moms and dads into personal habit formation, starting the year off right. I know a lot of people, whether you do resolutions or not, it's just the beginning of the year is a good time to kind of evaluate where you're doing, and it's a good launch point for stuff. And as we've had some contact, you deal a lot with helping parents establish rhythms for spiritual formation in their own house. And even what I said just now might sound like a completely foreign tongue to somebody. So
Mm.
would you care to explain what do we mean by helping establish rhythms of spiritual formation in the house?
Yeah, so for me, these spiritual rhythms are really God focused practices that we bring into our households so that we can all grow towards Jesus together. And so when we think about these different rhythms, often they look like spiritual disciplines. They look like prayer and they look like solitude and meditation and Bible reading, times of thankfulness and gratitude. All these different disciplines or rhythms help us to connect, and we use the word rhythm because of the importance of consistency, right? So when we prioritize these spiritual disciplines, what we're really doing is showing that our kids that they're important enough to do regularly. And when something's regular, it's a rhythm. And creating rhythm is something that I'm super passionate about.
Yeah, I don't know if you have ever read James Clear's Atomic Habits, but he talks
Hmm.
about the power of the 1% in there. That if radical change doesn't happen quickly, it doesn't happen overnight. But if you can just be aiming to get 1% better at something over the course of a year, I think it's like 300, 400% transformation that you have. And so when we talk about rhythms, we're wanting to instill things in our routine, in our daily life that don't take tremendous effort, but have tremendous results over the long term.
Right.
Am I correct? And that's the same mentality that you're walking into this with?
Absolutely. And similar to another story that James talks about in that book, he talks about the importance of if you want to run a marathon, the first thing you have to do is put your shoes on. Right. And
Yeah.
so when we talk about starting these rhythms, we really need to talk about where do we start small? Where can we put the Bible on the table or set up a prayer rhythm right before bed? That's a easy entry point that can get that rolling every day. So that 1% a day increases over time.
Yeah, and you know what? I think this is really helpful for moms and dads because I can tell you, even so, I've been a pastor for over 20 years, and not
Mm,
just that. Like I've been in family and student ministry nearly that entire time, and I
sure.
can be really intimidated in my own house when it comes to leading devotions and Bible studies, and I can give you at least 17 excuses why right now. But one of the realities is just like I'm tired. I got a lot on my mind in a bunch of different ways. I don't want to force things down my kid's throat. And so sometimes because of that, I do way less than what they would be ready to accept in there. And
Mm,
so, one of the challenges is just like, where do I start? Because when you think of devotions and prayers of blessing and stuff like that, it's like with anything new, part of the challenge is figuring out how to start, where to start. And my brain is often exhausted and I don't want to come up with something on my own. So how would you recommend if somebody hasn't done this? Like, what would be your coaching to a mom and dad of as far as starting points?
yeah. So for me, what's most important, especially talking to the exhausted parent, is to say that regularity is more important than content. So
Hmm.
it's important to remember that just saying, "Hey, uh, Jesus loves us, and we want to kind of make space to talk about that today," every day is kind of one of the things that's the most important. And so with middle, like kids in elementary or older, it could be as simple as the 3 J's. I have a colleague who talk about the junk of today, talk about the joy of today, and talk about how you saw Jesus today.
Ooh, I like that.
um, and and that's a really easy practice. And some people do highs and lows around
Um,
dinner, but that kind of injects a little Jesus into that conversation, and that's something you could just do over a meal, and that's a good place to start. Or in the car, another great place to start. However, when we talk about these rhythms, we're really talking about this habit formation. And for me, when I'm working in my coaching with parents, I talk about the difference between something you want to do and something being a habit is permanence. So when you start doing these spiritual rhythms, you want to make them a priority. And so you're making them a priority, making them a priority, making them a priority. And eventually, over time, showing up every day consistently or every other day consistently, it will eventually move into permanence. And that's when it's become a habit. You don't put brush your teeth on your to do list because it's a habit. But you might have to put sit down and read a devotion with my kids on your to-do list until it becomes that habit. And then it becomes something that you just are able to do consistently because everybody's in that rhythm. Everybody knows that after the plates are cleared and the table is ready, it's just for family engagement. It's a time to read a Bible verse and talk about Jesus.
Yeah, and, I think it's Michael Hyatt. It's funny, all of these people go together, in my head, because so much of the advice is similar because it's the advice that works. But this idea of even habit stacking, like you mentioned brushing your teeth. Every one of us, if you have kids that are really of any age, except maybe the very beginning of the baby and toddler years when life is a complete tornado and chaos and you might
Yeah.
be in the dark ages and there's no semblance of structure to your life whatsoever. Everybody else, you've got some kind of routine that you don't think a lot about. You just kind of are on autopilot as you go through it. And so one of the ways to do this is if you can spend some time intentionally habit stacking where I take this one new habit that I want to do and I stack it on to my regular routine of things that I'm already doing and maybe put it between two things that I know that I already do. And after a while, it doesn't take brain power and emotion. It's actually harder to not do it than it is to do it. And so I love that, and I think every family's different, but I'll tell you one of the challenges that we have with meal times. We do highs and lows. Mealtime in the United States has become very irregular, especially once your kids get a little older and you got sports schedules and church schedules and everything else. It's hard to have the same routines with them, but your morning routines and your evening routines maybe are a good place to start. What about to the mom and dad that has no spiritual formation habit of their own? How are they going to do as they try to lay this down on their kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So a huge thing for me in my coaching and in the resources that I tend to create are focused on helping parents equip themselves so then they have a reservoir of God's truth to speak from when they talk to their kids. And so here's just a kind of point blank, straight up conversation tip: is you can't preach or teach from a space of emptiness. And that means that if you want to be serious about spiritual formation and Christian education with your kids, you have to do some of that work yourself. And so, some of the work that I've done in my company, which is called Constant Source, we make resources for families for this very reason, because we've seen how there's this void in Christian resources where something is either kind of pointed at parents to be devotional for parents, or something is pointed at kids to be some sort of teaching material for kids. But very rarely is something designed to teach parents so that they can then teach their kids.
Yeah,
And
I like
so, yeah, and so that's what we kind of focus on. And so, to the parent who is like, "Hey, I'm really pumped about this idea. I want to share more of Jesus and my identity as a Christian with my kids, but I don't know where to start." The best place to start is creating a spiritual habit for yourself. And then once that becomes a rhythm, once that's something that you feel comfortable in, then it's very easy to just invite your kids in. I love stories of parents who, they give cereal to their kid and they sit across the table and they read their Bible. And eventually, every day of seeing, this their child is sitting there eating their cereal and looking at mom or dad reading their Bible. And then eventually they just go, "This must be Bible reading time." And they go and get their Bible and they bring it to the table because they see it. And it's about sharing and modeling that identity is really passed on.
Yeah, it's really neat. A number of years ago, my we were getting ready to do a kids camp at our church, and I had a pretty consistent morning routine of getting up and having time in the Word. And so most of the time when my kids came out of bed, that was my time to do it was before they got up because I knew as soon as anybody else in the house wakes up, my time is not my own. And so we're going to go to kids camp, and it's the first like sleepover church event that my son is going to get to go to. And so I think he got to go early because I was going to be there. So he was maybe about 5 or so. And he asked me, he's like, "But dad, where are you going to read your Bible in the morning?" And it was like one of those Super Bowl moments as a parent and heart melting because he had never mentioned that he had noticed it in his life up until that time. But like he was thinking through how's dad going to do his routine when he's there. Now, Let me be honest, that didn't mean that at any morning yet, he has got out and picked up his Bible and read it on his own without there, but there's some credibility with you as a parent when a child sees, like, this is actually a part of mom and dad's life, and it must be valuable. That must be why they're asking me to do it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, let me tell you about a new podcast that I just launched with a friend of mine. It's called Stories of Hope with Dr. Samuel Thomas. Each week, Dr. Sam and I have about a 15-minute conversation about what God is doing in the nation of India and around the world. You're going to hear about orphans being rescued from extreme poverty, from Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. You're going to hear about churches being planted in villages that have never heard the gospel before. You'll find out the power of a well to change a community. You're going to hear stories of kids who had parents who were killed or parents who were murderers who grow up and become pioneering leaders of the nation of India. If you need some encouragement this year and you want to see what God is doing around the world, check out Stories of Hope with Dr. Sam Thomas. There's a new episode released each Wednesday. It's about 15 minutes. You can find it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or go to hopegivers.org to find Stories of Hope. If you find it and you like it, I want to encourage you to leave a rating or a review and then share it with a friend that you know has a heart for missions as well. Once again, please take some time, check out my new podcast, Stories of Hope with Dr. Sam Thomas. There's a few different areas of this that we talk about prayer, we talk about scripture reading. I think even just the routines of like you talk about the asking of the particular questions, whether I like the junk joy in Jesus. I've never heard that one before. One of the other things I know that you're involved in is helping teach parents how to use blessings as a way to help form their children. And for those of us maybe not from a liturgical background, this is something that we're not as familiar with sometimes, but I know there's a lot of power. Could you give a little explanation?
Yeah. So blessings are one of these superfoods of spiritual life, in my opinion. I actually had my first encounter with blessing was when I was in high school and I was graduating, and I had this man. His name is Larry Snidel. May he rest in peace. He's not with us anymore, but he was an amazing man of God, and he came to my graduation party and gave me a card. And as a graduate does, they go through all their cards and they read all these nice little like 2-line notes, and they really are just looking for the checks and the $20 bills, right? In these cards. And then I get to Larry's card, and there's no money in it, and but instead, there's the best gift ever. And it's this handwritten blessing where he just encourages the man of God that he sees me becoming. And he prays over me that I would continue to uphold the mantle that he sees placed on my life. And I almost am coming to tears right now. It was one of the most important moments of my life. And so I kind of became really obsessed with blessings, biblical blessings, and what they could mean, and how you can use them in the family. And so, just to kind of give you a overview, blessings come. They're kind of seen all throughout the Bible, but one of the main places we see them is in Numbers 6. It's one of the most popular ones, I guess. So Numbers 6:24 through 26 reads, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. And this is just a little example of a blessing that we find in the Bible, and we see them all throughout. One of the reasons, though, I really love blessings when we talk about using them as spiritual formation for kids is they do three super important things, right? First, they allow us to petition in prayer for our kids. Jay, I know you talk about that quite a bit, where you talk about the importance of just saying prayers for our kids, right? But what I love about a blessing, it's inherently a prayer. And so when we speak blessing over our kids, we're not only petitioning on their behalf, but we're actually modeling what it looks like to pray. The second thing that's really important about that is blessings are filled with truth. They teach an aspect of God's very character. And so when they're crafted well, they're actually kind of passing on an instruction. And then finally, kind of the third thing that we always see in blessing is that there's usually some sort of invitation, an invitation to establish and affirm an identity in your child or even in yourselves. And so we see ways that these blessings, when spoken, kind of encourage and empower our kids to step into that identity. So there's these three huge pieces of blessing that are just really powerful.
One of my very close friends, they've been a missionary family for the last 10, 12 years or so. They've lived in Central Asia in a post-Soviet Muslim country that they got expelled from a couple of different times. One of those times being they got noticed that you have 10 days to leave the country or your visas will be permanently revoked. By the way, this is backdated 9 days. And so they had 24 hours to like get their family out of the country. So they've lived there, they've lived in Europe, back and forth as missionary kids to the United States. And my friend said one of the challenges they have is like this sense of uprootedness of what is home. And he coaches, like he doesn't just practice this, but he coaches missionaries that are working in the Muslim world and in a lot of war torn places, centering their family around rhythms of prayer and included in these are these times of blessing. There's a blessing in the morning, afternoon, and night. And he said one of the things that they've seen happen that shapes them over time is that no matter where they go, it doesn't matter where they're staying, it doesn't matter what their household objects are, like there's something that they can take with them to root them. And in some of these times where they're so disoriented, they have no words of their
Mm,
own to give
wow.
to the Lord, they can go back to these prayers of blessing and so it kind of got me on it over the past summer. I've been trying to incorporate that as a regular rhythm of my life, and I have noticed, especially the prayers of blessing at the end, as we came towards graduation time, as I'm talking with people in my church who have lost spouses this year
Mm, yeah.
that, man, I don't have the words, but now I have this blessing that I can write out in a card. I have this prayer that just in the moment I can pray for you because it's become a rhythm in my life. And we have the opportunity to not only do that with our kids, but you're giving your children the words that may one day be the very thing that they bless somebody else with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Absolutely, 100%. So, kind of transitioning, I guess, a little bit to the book that I wrote on blessings
Mhm.
called "May They Be Blessed." In even in the way that I encourage parents to use the book, I say, there's 50 blessings in here, and they're built out of the first 50 psalms. But you know what? If you only get to one blessing, and you say that repetitively and consistently with your kids forever, that's work well done. Because exactly what you're saying, right? You like are instilling God's truth in their heart. And so when they don't have the words, God's words come to the forefront for them. And that is powerful.
It really is. This is one of those we can talk about and we can talk about, and until you do it, you don't understand how powerful it can be. And the
Right.
first time you do it, it can be awkward, and the second and third and fourth and fifth time you do it, it can feel awkward, but so was tying your shoe, like, it wasn't that,
Totally.
but now,
Yeah.
like, I feel off. If my shoe is not properly tied, and that's, like, such a weird little example, but I feel off, and it can begin to happen in your family that as you start incorporating this as a regular routine, especially I think these prayers of blessings, I'm 100% on board with this. If you start incorporating them as a regular routine, my kids will not go to bed until we come to and I've got a middle school boy and a 10-year-old boy. No, 11. He turned 11 last week. They won't come to bed until we come and tuck them in and pray for them. And
Right.
sometimes it's like we're exhausted, we're going to bed, and we let them stay up a little later. They're like, "Well, we'll go get in bed and you can pray for us, and then we'll get back up and play." Because it's become like, no, like the day's not complete unless that's happened. And so,
I love that.
man, that's our goal with our family. So I want you to just say one more time, tell us about your book, tell us where to find it, because I again, I'm 100% on board with parents
Yeah.
getting the resources to make this as easy as possible for them.
Great. Okay. So the book is called May They Be Blessed. And that book can be found at our website, which is theconstantsource.com. Theconstantsource.com. Also, if you just Google "May They Be Blessed" and you put my name, Ken Kuhn, Kuhn, it's the first thing that you'll find on Google. And so the really, one of the things that you're getting with May They Be Blessed is not only are you getting these 50 blessings that I've crafted, also instructions to craft your own, because I'm super passionate about you as a parent being able to take something that God's showing you and speak that truth over your kids. But also, this book walks through the first 50 Psalms, 1 through 50. And it gives you a little bit of an understanding of the piece, the scripture that we pulled out, that we've built the blessing around. It gives a little bit of a in-depth view of that. And so you can treat this a little bit like a devotional if you want. And it's something that kind of edifies and should affirm parents first, and then gives them this 2 to 3 line prayer to speak over their kids as they can start that rhythm. And one of the awesome things about blessings is you can start speaking blessings over your kid from day one, right? You can hold them close, and whether you're feeding them or you're changing their diaper, you can speak God's truth over them. And that is a way to start the rhythm of discipleship from the very beginning.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ken, I appreciate you. I thank you so much for your resources. And for those listening, listen, I know most of you guys are in the middle of your marathon training because it's the beginning of January and that's your new goal. So you're listening to this podcast as you're out running 15 miles or so. Maybe you don't remember the links that he just said. They're in the show notes. Everything we talked about, his book, his website, they'll be in the show notes. If you want to get in contact with him, you can go there and do that. So Ken, thank you for coming today. Look forward to having you back in the future, and God bless you and your ministry.
Absolutely, Jay. Thank you so much for having me.
Friend, if you're still listening all the way to the credits, then I hope that means that this was a particular blessing to you to hear this podcast. If so, I want to encourage you to share it with somebody else that you think might be helped by it. You're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find out more information about show notes, about past issues, all kinds of things to help your family. And I do want to say that Let's Parent on Purpose is a user-supported podcast. And if you would like to be a part of that, you can go to letsparentonpurpose.com, learn how to be a supporter through Patreon or through a one-time gift. Thank you so much for listening. Again, share this with somebody that you know needs to hear it. Remember that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. And we'll talk to you soon.